In aviation, most accidents don't come from one big mistake. It's the Swiss cheese model. A tiny oversight, a missing part, a split-second decision, and all the holes line up for disaster. This is the story of a 70-year-old Beechcraft Bonanza, a fuel selector handle that looked engaged but wasn't, and is also a reminder of one of the most important lessons a pilot can ever learn. When you got a runway you can make, and you've got problems, you take it. The pilot in our story bought a Bonanza that was built in the 40s, about 3 months prior to the accident. He had about 17 hours in the airplane, and like most new owners, he was still getting used to the systems, especially the fuel selector, which doubled as this hand fuel pump called the wobble pump. If you've never seen one of these, imagine a single lever that serves two jobs. When pushed down, it selects the left or the right tank, but pulled up, it disengages from the valve and now becomes a pump that can pressurize the system manually. Seems useful back in the day, but it's confusing. In fact, I'm confused even explaining it. Back in the summer of 22, our pilot and a passenger departed Marshall County Airport in Lincoln, Illinois and headed south. Let me tell you, this is a cool little airport. I did my first solo cross country to this airport. It's kind of nestled next to the Illinois River in central Illinois. If you have a chance to go to this airport, it's really cool. When he takes off, the fuel selector is to the left tank as the manual recommends. About an hour and 13 minutes into the flight, everything seemed normal, cruising along at 6,500, engine doing great, when the pilot decides to switch to the right tank just in case. As he reaches down to rotate the handle to the right, he stated later it was hard to feel the indents. It wasn't about 4 or 5 minutes later, the engine suddenly dies. The RPM drops to about 1,500 and the pilot hears the sound, thinks they may have partial power, but in all reality, it's just the engine windmilling in the wind and not providing any power at all. Still heading south, and it just so happens that right below and a tad behind the aircraft is Centralia Municipal Airport. The pilot, realizing that he had just passed this airport, turns around and starts to enter a left traffic pattern for runway 18 as he's still a bit high for a straight into runway 36. While he's doing this, he's attempting to troubleshoot the fuel issue, but to no avail. By the time he realizes he doesn't have enough altitude to complete the pattern, he tries to stretch his glide, but the Bonanza sinks fast. The airplane clips a tree and crashes into a backyard just about a half a mile short of the runway threshold. The pilot is severely injured, and unfortunately, his passenger does not survive the impact. In 1969, the FAA issued an airworthiness directive for this very issue in regards to the fuel selector switch. It required either replacing the switch with a combined selector pump setup or installing a small electrical switch with a warning light for a clear signal that the valve wasn't connected. In this airplane, unfortunately, that switch wasn't installed. In fact, it was found loose in a map pocket in the cockpit. Okay, beyond all the fuel issues, the plane still had a chance to land at the airport. The pilot later said, in hindsight, I should have made a straight-in approach and slipped it down to runway 36. Pilot Training 101. When you lose power, you go to best glide and then aviate, right? That's aviating the plane. And when you have a runway in sight, navigate to that runway. And in times like this, forget the pattern. Get that aircraft down the ground safely. Look, I get it. Stress, confusion, maybe a false sense that we have partial power and you think flying the pattern makes sense. But that is why we practice this stuff, or why we should practice this stuff. Even after you've been flying for years, complacency kills, and it literally in this case. Here are some takeaways or some lessons learned from this accident. 1, know your aircraft. If you own or fly a complex or older airplane, take the time to learn every quirk, every little thing that can go wrong in that aircraft. 2, verify compliance. 80s are important for a reason, so if your airplane is missing one, maybe you should address it. And 3, most of all, when you lose power, land the plane, especially on a runway when one's available. Ugly, not coordinated, whatever it takes, put the plane on the ground on the runway. Whether we're a pilot or an air traffic controller, we all face a decision point someday. One moment where our training meets instinct. Most of the time, it's small. A crosswind landing, a go-around, a checklist item. But sometimes it's bigger. It's an engine that goes quiet when you least expect it. What will you do? I know what I will do. I'll find the runway or a suitable place to land and figure out the rest later. Thank you for watching us here on Normal Freaks, bringing more aviation stories to you, making you better, making you the best of the best, so that way you will be the best air traffic controller, the best pilot, the best aviator, the best aviation person in the business. Until next time, I'm Tim Kiefer. We'll catch you then.